The demon world's king has been impeached and rendered jobless, while the heroic hero was captured following a failed expedition. However, fate brings them together on an unpredictable journey into the unknown, facing numerous dangers and twists. The story begins in the Demon King's castle, where Merlin Lucifer, the Lord of Pride, sleeps peacefully on his throne when his sister, Lilith, enters and becomes thrilled upon seeing him sleep. It was unusual for her to see her brother asleep, so she approached him closely to take advantage of the chance to kiss him. The church squad interrupted her as she was ready to kiss him by requesting that the Demon King appear and engage them in combat. Becoming irritated by their commotion, Lilith nevertheless went in for a kiss. But she was halted by a finger. Merlin awoke and asked what she was up to. She tried to bite his finger, but he quickly removed it and flicked her head. She was murmuring a bit more, and eventually she would have reached the lips. She was abruptly pulled toward Merlin as he grinned. He said that no one in the world could ever surprise him. While Lilith was relishing this moment, outside noises disturbed her tranquility. Then she took out a whip and swore that she would get rid of them, but she was stopped by Merlin, who urged her not to lose her cool over some tiny fries, as he decided to personally send them to the hereafter since they arrived searching for mischief on the last day of his reign. His smile became wider. Merlin and Lilith then went outside to see the intruders. On the battlefield, Merlin's minions were fighting against human soldiers and adventurers. Merlin then looked at a silver-haired woman and figured that she was the hero of this generation. She was easily defeating the monsters, but Merlin thought that she was weak. A giant worm appeared and attacked the soldiers, but Hero's Ice Lance destroyed the giant monster easily. She announced that she was the 233rd hero, Alice Claudia, and she'd defeat the Demon King. Next, we see a bishop enraged at the worthless peasants for impeding Alice's progress. His assistant tells him that the peasants were only cannon fodder, and that after all of them died, the church army would claim victory. But he is concerned about whether Alice can fight the Demon King. The bishop chuckled and remarked that it was alright since they still had their covert weapon in the skies, even if Alice did not defeat the Demon King. Alice discovers that the monsters have overpowered the vanguard squad and goes to their rescue. To everyone's amazement, a gigantic flying whale suddenly emerged in the sky as the bishop unexpectedly called forth the weapon that the church had been preparing for 100 years. Even Alice felt it was a terrifying beast. The bishop then gave the command for the whale to attack. This surprised Alice because this attack would destroy even the vanguard squad. Merlin heard the sound of the human soldiers shouting that they would not make it from the whale attack, but to everyone's surprise, Merlin stopped the attack. He announced he was the only person to decide who lives or dies. Bishop shouted that this was impossible. How could an attack even more powerful than the Holy Arcanery be blocked? His assistant said the Demon King was much more powerful than they had imagined, so they should retreat. But the bishop didn't listen and said that the white whale's body was made using all kinds of metals and had been blessed by the goddess. He then ordered the white whale to crush Lucifer with its body. Lucifer laughed and unsheathed his blade to attack the whale. As the whale attacked Lucifer, he cut it in half. This shocked the bishop and all the soldiers. Even Alice realized that the Demon King, Lucifer, was extremely powerful. Lucifer then looked at the soldiers and announced that he was the first Demon King and would grant them glorious deaths. Bishop then asked the hero to save them. She dashed toward Lucifer and challenged him to a duel, but Lucifer just smiled and attacked the soldiers. With just one slash, he killed all the remaining soldiers, the bishop, and his assistant. The final battle of Demon King Merlin's reign ended with only the unconscious hero remaining in the face of Lucifer's overwhelming attack. Merlin, the ruler of pride and the third owner of the first demon palace, possessed immense power at birth but also suffered from a curse that shortened his lifespan due to heartaches. However, he had a demon sword called Eden that increased its user's life force each time it was used to slay powerful enemies, which he hoped would eventually allow him to lift his curse by defeating the strongest person in the world. After killing the church soldiers, Merlin planned to leave the demon castle, but Lilith begged him not to go. Merlin explained that if he continued to stay in the castle, the curse on his heart would kill him, and he didn't want his sister to see that. Lilith suggested that Merlin kill her so his lifespan could be extended, but Merlin scolded her and said there was no way he could do that to his sister. Merlin expressed his love for his sister and promised to return to her once his curse was lifted. Lilith agreed to let him go but warned him about the danger of other women bewitching him. Before leaving, Merlin noticed Alice sleeping and decided to take her with him as a slave to help him in the outside world. He explained this to Lilith, who misunderstood it as a proposal and decided to complete her bridal training before Merlin returned. Meanwhile, Merlin carries Alice on his back as they journey towards the island's edge, hoping to find a way off it. We learn about Alice's past as she left the mountains where she lived, determined to vanquish the Demon King. However, she soon realized her goal was wishful thinking after witnessing Merlin's power. When they reach the island's edge, they find all the boats wrecked, stranding them. While Merlin goes to find a boat, Alice awakens to find a demon wolf ready to attack her. Merlin saves her and proclaims he will not let the wolf harm her. Alice feels something from Merlin as he protects her and chases the wolf away. When he approached Alice, she adopted a combat position. Alice believed Merlin had fallen in love with her beauty and desired to defile her. She charged at Merlin with all her might, but Merlin stopped her with just 2 fingers. He grasped her chin and told her that her body belonged to him. Alice, however, smacked his palm and vowed never to submit to such a wicked person. But Merlin chuckled in response, saying she had no choice but to surrender to him since he was her abductor. He threatened to treat her in an irrational and harsh manner once he possessed her body. Alice expected that Merlin would use her as a breeding place for his demon children. She tried to prevent him from touching her, but Merlin grabbed her and pushed her into a boat. Alice gripped the blade over her neck, warning Merlin not to approach too close or she would kill herself. Merlin examined the ore before stepping on it to strike Alice. He was wondering how a stupid girl like her could become a hero. Alice looked at him with teary eyes and told him to do things if he was horny, but he couldn't get violent with her. He then pointed towards the oars and said that they were going to cross the seas to enter the territory of Great Britain. Alice called him stupid and explained that even with a warship, it took a lot of time and people for them to reach this island. Also, there were a lot of sea creatures in the sea who would kill them instantly, so it was impossible for 2 of them to take turns rowing across the Strait of Akoni as they wouldn't make it out alive. Merlin laughed and said that she misunderstood something. He said that he had already told her that he was going to have her body do some unreasonable and inhumane things, so the only one rowing was her, and it was for himself. He would stand in front and enjoy the cool sea breeze. With a dumb look on her face, she shouted. 3 days later, Merlin stood at the front while Alice muttered why none of the sea creatures had attacked them yet. Merlin told her the reason, that a big one was following them. That's why the rest of the little sea monsters chose to keep their distance. Suddenly, the sea monster emerged from the bottom of their boat. Alice knew that the monster was called the Overlord of Orkney, and even though Merlin was strong, he wouldn't be able to defeat the Overlord. Merlin pointed toward the beast and said, "Wasn't the monster too ugly?" He laughed at the monster, saying that for such a thick neck, its head was way too small. This angered the beast as it dashed towards them, but Merlin cut it in half with a single strike. He then pulled on the cheeks of the shocked Alice and ordered her to keep rowing. He said that the monster's blood would lure the man-eating sharks. So, if she didn't want to become shark bait, she should move quickly. Alice concluded that Merlin was strong on land and even on the ocean. So, she could not allow him to arrive in a country of humans. She then asked him why he had left the demon palace. Merlin then thinks up an excuse and tells her the reason he left was that he was bored at the castle. Alice asked how he had grown so powerful. Merlin then told her about his past. His mother was the people's second ruler, also known as Lucifer II, but she was killed in combat during the church's 197th crusade, leaving him and his sister to rely on each other. So he resolved to grow strong to defend his sister. He defeated the old giant demon in the snowy mountains, fought the bull-headed sorcerer in the forest, and even fought the infernal demon to death. Ultimately, he slew the demon that was tormenting his sister and ascended to the position of Demon King. He then urges her to continue rowing. And he thought to himself that leaving the demon palace was the best action, as his heart felt more at ease after killing the monster. And he thought that when he was near the stupid hero, his heart calmed down. The story continues after Merlin and Alice have traveled for several days. They finally reach the land, but Merlin is not sure if this is the land of Great Britain. He questioned Alice about why he could not see any nearby villages. Using all of her power, Alice climbed out of the boat. She resented Merlin for making her spend the entire trip rowing the boat. She promised to exact her vengeance once she had acquired the secret technique of ice from her teacher. Merlin approached her and reminded her that she was his servant. After being tortured, Alice yelled that this was Great Britain, but they were not at the port. Merlin then said his goodbyes to her, and as he was walking away, an idea occurred to him. He believes that he would need money to exist in a country of humans, but he has not a penny. With a twinkle in his eyes, he shifted his gaze to Alice. He recalled feeling mithril armor on her chest while carrying her on his back, and if he could get his hands on that armor, he could sell it for a lot of money. He returns to Alice immediately and tells her that leaving her in such a way rips his heart so she can give him her most priceless possession. What does he want from her at this time? Alice asks. Then Merlin commands her to strip, and she begs him to be gentle with her because it's her first time. Merlin seized her armor, but he again made fun of her flat chest. He bid farewell to her and left after grabbing the armor. Alice had no choice but to curse him when she was alone in the wasteland. A year later, two thieves were camped in a tree on the outskirts of Wales, UK, looking for a target. One of the bandits told his superior that a guy was approaching, but he was dressed in tatters and appeared to have gone days without eating. His senior chuckled as he held a poster and stared at the man. When he tossed away the poster, he stated that looks might be misleading. Merlin, who hadn't eaten in days, was the man in question. The identical poster flew into his face. As Merlin looked over the ad, he saw that he was wanted for a few frantic dashes. He discovered that the human world was so painful that he couldn't even eat after wasting his money. The bandits suddenly stopped him, but he disregarded them and tried to flee. The robbers confronted him and threatened to take his possessions and go. But Merlin warned them to stay away from him, or he would kill them both. Then one of the thieves displayed his skill by tossing an apple into the air, and using his blade to peel it. The apple was about to fall, and Merlin, who hadn't eaten in days, was waiting for it to land so he could eat it. The bandit charged at Merlin, but Merlin caught the apple and killed him. The second bandit fled to save his life as soon as his comrade died. Suddenly, the bandit's lifeless body transformed into a goblin. Merlin discovered the goblins disguised themselves as robbers to deceive the Empire's army. Merlin didn't worry about it because it was not his concern, and he departed. Meanwhile, the other goblin arrived at His Majesty's hideout and requested an audience. Within the hideout, his boss questioned the goblin about the money. The goblin apologized for being unable to rob anybody. The goblin then informed his commander that a human had murdered Ragu-senpai. When the human killed Senpai, he hadn't even drawn his sword. His commander smiled and said the humans planned to launch a war with the goblins. Merlin entered a city bustling with activity. He paid his last 2 copper coins for the gate tariff and decided to look for a job. He remembered the past when he stole Alice's armor. He sold the armor and lived in a private manor. He even hired butlers, maids, and chefs from high-end restaurants to prepare all his meals. He even visited race courses and bet extravagantly, though he had never won. When he returned to his senses, he realized that he had spent all his money and even racked up a huge debt. As he became used to his lifestyle, he continued to visit high-end restaurants and dine and dash. Ultimately, he became a fugitive and started living on the run from his creditors. Now, his condition is so bad that the Demon King of the First Palace has turned into a busker. He was calling the people on the streets to come and watch his performance. He then used the sidestepping repetition skill to attract the audience. He could hear cheers from the crowd, as everyone thought he was a martial artist. After entertaining the crowd, he asked them for some money. But the crowd quickly looked away and dispersed. He then noticed a rich-looking child on the side. He quickly stops the child and says that the child has the bone structure of a kung fu genius. He asks for 2 copper coins from the child, and he will teach him a skill in return. The child introduced himself as Henry and told Merlin he had no money, but Merlin didn't listen. According to Merlin, the child looks rich and should have something. Merlin tried to scare the boy and asked for 2 copper coins if he wanted to live. Merlin then promised to teach him an invincible sword art if he could give him just 2 coins. When the boy heard about sword art, he got excited and asked what kind of sword art Merlin was talking about. Merlin confidently replied that it was a quick draw, but Henry made fun of the skill as even the regular disciples were uninterested in that skill. He then told Merlin to stop scamming people and find a job for himself. He then gave 2 candies to Merlin and said goodbye to him. Suddenly, Merlin noticed a bishop telling the story of his past. According to the bishop, Merlin killed an army of 100,000 people without leaving any trace. He then noticed a girl saying that even the 233rd hero died after being ravaged by the ugly demon lord. The bishop then showed the holy book to the crowd and told them that it would protect them from the demon lord, and they could have it for just 10 gold coins. The crowd quickly bought all the books from the bishop. This angered Merlin as they were scamming citizens, and the worst part was they were not giving him a cut after using his name like that. A bit later, Merlin was in a bar, asking the owner to hire him as a server. The owner could not resist the attractive Merlin and agreed. Then, the owner asked whether Merlin was a visitor from a nearby town. Indeed, Merlin responded, adding that he could only work for a maximum of 2 months before he had to start traveling again. He hasn't recovered from the heart curse, so he must find powerful foes to help him live longer. The owner then performed some math and told him that as a temporary employee, he would be paid 1 gold coin each month, including lodging and food. Merlin is surprised when she pays more than he anticipated. The owner then informed him that her pub is only available to ladies in the evening, so Merlin must use nice words and create personal ties with women to sell them beverages. This astonished Merlin, the demon king of the first palace, and it was then that he realized how far he had fallen in this other realm. He was now forced to sell beverages with his body. When the owner sensed Merlin's hesitation, she told him she would offer him more money if he quit. After all, the proud demon king opted to capitulate and take the task. Merlin eventually gets ready and begins training for the night. In the meantime, Alice is traveling to Scotland to board a gigolo. When she lost the armor a year ago, she was left with a huge debt that she paid to settle. Alice was only able to register as an adventurer. While she is still deeply in debt, she is unlike Merlin because she can afford housing and 1 or 2 dresses. And as soon as she discovered this gigolo mission, she accepted the task with a reward of 5,000 gold coins. She was delighted since it was simple to catch a gigolo, but she still needed to locate him because his face had been damaged on the poster. Meanwhile, Merlin was so good at selling drinks to the ladies in the pub. Suddenly, Henry enters the pub and says he is back. Henry was shocked to see that useless man from before working at his mom's pub. Henry asked his mom how she could hire a useless guy like him. Even though Merlin is angry with the child's behavior, he keeps his smile as he can't be rude to the owner's child. Henry shouted at her mom and told her to stop hiring unknown people, so the others kept bad-mouthing her. Merlin noticed Henry's dirty clothes and probably fought with the kids who bad-mouthed his mother. Merlin then put the sword on the table and said that he needed to be stronger if he wanted to get those people to shut up. But Henry insulted Merlin's skill again and ran from there. The next day, Merlin was listening to a conversation between some adventurers. One of the members said to his partner that his share would be 2,000 gold coins in this mission. His partner asked with a shocked look why he was giving him a larger share. The man then looked at their other member, and they both announced that they were getting married after this mission. Merlin looked at them and knew that this was a death mission. Merlin then asked the group about this mission they were going on. One member said the quest was to kill 100 goblins and cut their left ears. Merlin thought that the group would be fine if this were just a goblin hunt. At night, the group was fighting the goblins and had already killed 63 goblins. They need 37 more, and then they will immediately retreat. After that, suddenly, a goblin jumped down from the cliff and instantly killed the group's leader. A small goblin was sitting on the shoulder of the big one, who introduced himself as Prime Minister Jeju, a high-ranking goblin magician. The fact that a powerful goblin was in such a location astounded the adventurer. Jeju then attacked the man with a fire spell. The girl boosted his defense with magic, but as soon as the boy defended the magic attack, he got attacked by the big goblin. Jeju then ordered the goblins to capture the woman. The man asked the goblins to leave his lover alone. So, Jeju then offered him a deal. So, the fate of this couple hangs in the balance. What do you think the deal is? Will the couple be able to survive the goblin assault? The story continues as Alice reaches the best inn to stay in the town. She opens the door and is surprised at how lively the inn is. The owner, Martha, welcomes her, and she introduces herself as an adventurer. After she asks to book a room, she is shown to her room. Martha also mentions that their top performer will be dancing that night and invites Alice to come down and watch if she is interested. Alice, however, is not interested in the performance and goes straight to her room. However, before she enters her room, she shows Martha a poster of a wanted man and asks if she recognizes the person in the poster, but the person's face is torn. She replies that she isn't sure and she leaves. At the same time, Merlin comes out of his room and says he feels like he heard that silly hero's voice, or it is probably his imagination. Inside her room, Alice lays down on the bed, tired after a stressful journey, and reminisces about the time when pirates captured her. At that time, she was saved by an unknown swordsman who defeated the pirates who had a fleet of 17 warships. Alice fell in love with the swordsman even though she had not seen his face and believed he was generous and easygoing. She then remembers that she needs to write a letter to her master. In the letter, she tells him she is doing well and is so rich that she doesn't need to worry about money. She also mentions that she has gotten into a relationship with the legendary swordsman of Elgin. Alice then prays to God that she never has to re-encounter Merlin and for God to punish him. At that very moment, Merlin sneezes and becomes confused. He habitually sneezes around the same time every day since someone could be cursing him. After a while, Alice comes downstairs to get a drink and overhears some women shouting for someone named Little Daisy. She thinks, who is Little Daisy, that the women are screaming for that she can even hear their voices from upstairs. Meanwhile, Henry, also in the inn, becomes angry and calls the women hoes. Alice explains that the term hoe is too harsh and asks Henry to look at how well dressed they are. However, Henry insists all the women are married and have come to the inn for a good time. He says it is because his mom is running that sort of business is why people are saying all kinds of things about her. And Alice gets the idea that he is the owner's son. But he then compliments Alice, saying she is different because she is pure and simple. Then, Henry notices the gold plate on Alice's waist and asks her if she is a gold-plate adventurer. And she replies yes. He asks her to teach him a sword skill, as he wants to learn one, but Alice explains that her skills are impossible to learn without proper inheritance. Instead, she pats him on his head, advises him to drink milk to strengthen his body, and promises to teach him later. Henry gets happy and starts to drink his milk. He praises her for being more insightful and better than a useless Merlin who only knows how to use the quick draw technique to scam others. Just then, Alice hears some women shouting that Little Daisy has appeared. Henry tells Alice that Little Daisy is a useless young man who only knows how to do quick draw skill. Despite his uselessness, Henry says Daisy is a complete chick magnet, and the perfect example of a gigolo. When Alice hears Henry call him a gigolo, she unsheathes her sword and goes to capture Daisy. On stage, she approaches Merlin and says he must be the gigolo from Scotland and is wanted for debt avoidance. She tells him to come with and should not put on any resistance. Realizing what he's done, Alice angrily attacks Merlin, but he easily dodges the attacks and asks her to stop since they've known each other for a long time. He removes his mask and says, "It's me, Alice." In a second, Alice's pain and anger over what he's done to her leave, and she becomes dumbfounded. Merlin asks if she's forgotten all those lovely nights they spent together rowing the boat. Alice, still angry, says that because of him, she has to live in shame and attacks him again. But Merlin grabs her and says that killing him for only robbing is a little too far. Unable to do anything, Alice starts crying and tells him how much she's suffered because of him. Merlin then hears other women calling him a scumbag for doing bad things, and even Henry looks at him in disgust and asks what he's done to Alice. Henry points towards Alice and tells Merlin he should be grateful that Alice likes him, but how dare he take advantage of her love. Merlin thinks that if they're going to misunderstand like this, he won't be able to work there anymore. So, to prevent that, he quickly hugs Alice and asks her to calm down, as he'll buy her a drink. After a while, all the customers leave, and Alice and Merlin sit beside each other. Alice is happy because the iced milk in the pub is so good. Merlin insults her again, but Alice says she has a boyfriend, Elgin's master swordsman, who will cut him in half. Meanwhile, the owner, Martha, thinks that Merlin is popular with girls, as a high-ranked adventurer is his girlfriend. Martha then says that she'll put Henry to sleep so they can take their time chatting. Alice asks Merlin to return her armor, and she'll call it quits. But Merlin nervously says sorry and tells her he's already sold the armor and used the money to bet on the ponies at the royal racetrack. Alice is shocked as the armor is worth tens of millions of gold coins, but Merlin has spent it so quickly. She grabs Merlin and angrily tells him that until he returns her armor, it's not over between them. But Merlin says she knows who he is, and the moment he snatched it from her, the armor became his. Merlin says that the only thing he can offer in return for the armor is his life. But they're not enemies, as he's no longer the Demon King. However, if she insists on taking his life, that won't be true anymore. Alice freezes in front of Merlin's murderous aura, but Merlin tells her to relax as he won't cause any trouble in Martha's shop. Alice asks why he isn't stealing the armor if he's strong. Merlin replies that, unlike humans, a contract is a sacred agreement to demons, so he will not break it. Alice replies that he just said he is no longer a Demon King, so why is he hung up on something like this? But Merlin says that even though he is no longer a Demon King, he is still Pride's previous ruler, so he won't do it. Alice then tells him she is no longer a hero, as the armor is the church's property, and she needs to pay them for it. To do that, she needs to accept S-rank missions that pay 10,000 gold coins for a single mission. But they are too dangerous to complete. Merlin mutters that the reward for one mission is several tens of thousands of gold coins and asks Alice if that is true. Alice says yes, as S-rank missions are fraught with danger. Merlin smiles and thinks that he has finally found his next job. He concludes that it is a perfect job for him as he will be killing Saint-rank enemies to extend his lifespan and earn a lot of gold coins in the process. He then asks Alice what it takes to become an adventurer. Alice replies that anyone with aura or mana can become one, and an active adventurer's referral works too, as Merlin doesn't have an aura or mana. He begs Alice to refer him, but Alice quickly refuses and says she will never refer a scumbag like him. So that night, they parted on bad terms. A few days later, Martha asks Merlin if he has seen Henry. She tells him that she hasn't seen him since the morning and is going outside to look for him. Meanwhile, later that night, the same adventurer who made a deal with the goblins reaches the gate and asks the guards to open it. One of the guards opens the gate to help the adventurer, who cries and apologizes to him. The guards then notice an army of goblins. The Prime Minister of Goblins then orders them to kill all the men in the town and steal all their women. The goblins then enter the village and start killing the men. The adventurer then asks the Prime Minister to release his lover, as he has done what they told him. But the goblin laughs and kills the man with a fire spell. Everyone inside the village hears the alarm, but the goblins come and start killing them. Meanwhile, Alice notices the people running to save their lives. An old man tells her to run but gets killed before Alice. Alice then kills the goblin with ice magic. She then challenges the goblins to come and attack her. The goblins attack her, but she kills them easily using ice magic. She then creates ice wings and flies into the sky, where she starts to rain down the ice magic, killing goblins. At the same time, inside the pub, Merlin is chatting with the beautiful ladies around him when he soundly hears some voice shouting "Run!" and they are here. He tells them he wants to check something outside, but suddenly, the goblins destroy the pub's door and enter to kidnap the women. The women next to Merlin become frightened by this, and Merlin wonders what the goblins are doing in the town. The story continues as the goblins barge into the pub where Merlin is to kidnap the ladies. In another part of the town, Martha is searching for Henry, but at the same time, Henry, who is playing with the other kids, notices that the city is being attacked. He is surprised by what is happening, and then he hears his mother calling his name. He looks down and sees his mom getting kidnapped by the goblins. He tries to save her, but the other kids stop him from going outside, saying he will be killed if he goes after the goblins. In the pub, Merlin kills the goblins with a stool, saying they shouldn't have come when he had guests to entertain. He then noticed the army of goblins charging at him, but he killed all the goblins with a single strike of his sword. Soon, a goblin informed the Prime Minister, Jeju, that their western forces had been annihilated. Jeju shockingly asked if there was a high ranker, but the goblin said he couldn't even sense mana or aura from him, and the person looked like an ordinary human but handsome with blonde hair and red eyes. However, Jeju tells him there is no way an ordinary person can wipe out their forces in the west, and something is amiss. However, the goblin stated that he witnessed him and that, without unsheathing his sword, the man wiped out their army. The goblin continued, even the soldiers posted on Main Street were wiped out with ice, and the silver-haired magic swordswoman who did it is now moving toward them. Jeju then ordered troops to retreat to replenish their numbers with the human females they kidnapped. Soon, Alice noticed that the goblins were retreating with some of the female hostages, and the rain would wash away their trails, so she ran after them. But before she could save some of the women, she got attacked by a large goblin. She fought an intense battle with the goblin and was able to kill it by sealing it in ice and shattering it. But the goblin's army got away. After the battle ended and the goblins retreated, the village chief called for everyone to assemble. He said that many people had been captured and taken away to the mountains, so they all needed to go and save them. But the townspeople feared the goblins and suggested forgetting about the kidnapped women. Henry shouted at the people and said that his mom and the others must be waiting, so they must rescue them, and they would all go to hell if they didn't. Suddenly, the people heard the pastor's voice, who said that they wouldn't descend to hell. The village chief then asks the pastor if he has a solution to their problem. The people bowed before the pastor and asked him to save their family. The pastor assures them that he will relieve them of their sins in the goddess's name and shows them the holy book. He says their sins will be forgiven if they buy the book for 100 gold coins. He easily fooled the people, but suddenly they heard Alice's voice. She announces she is a gold-plate adventurer and the Vatican's 233rd hero, Alice Claudia. But the pastor insulted Alice and called her a disgrace to the church. Alice unsheathed her sword and told him to pray to the goddess if he believed she would answer his prayers. The pastor quickly fell to the ground and apologized for fooling people. Alice gave a speech and motivated the villagers to attack the goblin's hideout. Alice then asks the village chief to tell her the location of the goblin nest, to which he agrees. But he informs her that the goblin emperor is a saint-ranked being. However, she tells him not to worry. Meanwhile, inside the pub, Merlin tries to calm the ladies while telling them they are safe as long as they are by his side. Suddenly, Henry enters the pub, and Merlin asks him where he is and what about his mother, but Henry ignores him and runs to his room. He picked up his father's sword. He tells Merlin it is not his business and says he will save his mom. Merlin realized that the goblins had kidnapped Martha and tried to calm Henry down. But Henry shouted that he would protect his mom and ran from there. Merlin then told the ladies to wait at the pub while he went outside and took care of everything. At the same time, Alice notices an injured adventurer outside the village. She tells the adventurer that the villagers are coming and he will be saved. When the adventurer realized she was the gold-plate adventurer Alice, he asked her to save his fiancée. He tells her what happened with the goblins and his deal with them to save his fiancée, saying he had no choice. Alice then takes his adventurer badge and promises that his fiancée will return it to him, and she leaves. As she leaves, he informs her that the Goblin Emperor is a saint-ranked individual, so she has to be careful. However, on her way, Alice thinks she is a match for a saint-ranked being and remembers Merlin's words about the untalented knowing their place. But she is determined to challenge her limits. And even in the face of despair, she must believe in herself. Inside the Goblin's palace, the Emperor was happy with the Prime Minister as he had captured the beautiful ladies. He told him to throw them into the dungeon again, as he would enjoy the women after bathing. Jeju then ordered the other goblins to be ready for an ambush, as he knew that the humans would come to save their family. Suddenly, the goblins noticed something in white approaching. But before they could do anything, they were killed by Alice's ice attacks. Only Jeju is left at the entrance, so he attacks Alice with fire magic, but she quickly dodges the attack and kicks him into a wall, knocking him unconscious. She then enters the cave but is ambushed by two big goblins, which she kills with ice magic. Later, all the villagers also reach the goblins' lair and angrily dash toward the goblins. As the villagers attacked the goblins, the Prime Minister's subordinates had to report the situation to him. But he was just recovering after being knocked unconscious by Alice's attack. When he hears about the villagers' attack, he gets angry. Jeju gets up and creates a firewall using the earth fire spirit to stop the humans from attacking. As the villagers are running away from the fire, Merlin arrives there. Surprised by the firewall technique, Merlin then asks one of the villagers if he has seen Henry from the Moonlight Pub. But the man says he has not seen him since little kids weren't allowed in the mountains. Frustrated by Henry's behavior, Merlin gets close to the firewall, and the village chief tells him that there is a saint-ranked being in the cave and that they should leave the Goblin Emperor to the silver-haired magic swordswoman. Merlin smiled and said that she was someone who had already lost to him. The village chief and others are surprised by what he says, and Merlin doesn't bother to explain. He then opens a path for himself in the firewall without even unsheathing his sword, and this shocks the villages. As Merlin leaves, the village chief says that he seems to have seen Merlin before, and the atmosphere around him is the same as that of the master swordsman who vanquished the pirates at Port Elgin half a year ago. The village chief then compares the Elgin swordsman and Merlin's little Daisy Gigolo character, and concludes they are the same person. Later inside the cave, the Prime Minister, Jeju tells his subordinates that the villagers will not be able to break through the wall of fire, so they should prioritize catching the silver-haired magic swordswoman and bringing her to him. But one of his subordinates asks whether high-class goods like hers should be offered to the Goblin Emperor. Jeju scolds him. As they are talking, Merlin enters the cave, and Jeju is shocked that Merlin can enter the cave. He asks Merlin who he is, and Merlin introduces himself as Little Daisy. Seeing that Merlin doesn't look powerful as he has no mana or aura, Jeju attacks him with a fireball. But the attack doesn't even scratch Merlin. Jeju is surprised that Merlin could disperse the attack easily and thinks Merlin is using a trick. He then attacks Merlin again with a flaming tornado using a fire and wind spirit, but Merlin easily blocks it. Merlin then says he thought Jeju was strong since he looks like a mutated goblin but is weak. However, Jeju is frustrated that his attack is not having any effect and uses his ultimate attack, the Spear of Doom. But Merlin easily catches it and breaks it while mocking him. Then, Merlin dashed toward Jeju and killed him in an instant. Before Jeju dies, he asks Merlin why he didn't use his sword to kill him. Merlin says he won't draw his blade for a weakling like him. After Jeju dies, Merlin walks deeper into the cave, saying that in addition to being invisible in close quarters combat, he is also immune to magic, so finding a worthy opponent is difficult. Then he enters the cave for his main purpose. The story continues as Alice reaches the cave. After knocking out the goblin guarding the cells, she frees the ladies from the cell. All of them are surprised to see Alice, and Martha asks about Henry. Alice says Henry is fine and waiting for her in the village, not knowing he is also in the cave. Alice tells them they should leave before someone comes, and as they leave, Alice asks them if they know anyone named Cecil. One of the ladies answers that she is Cecil and, as Alice wants, tells her that her fiancé, Tron, is waiting for her. Suddenly, the Goblin Emperor appeared behind Alice and attacked her, smashing her into a wall. He then tries to capture the women, saying he will skin them if he catches them. But Alice suddenly seals the Goblin Emperor inside a magical ice barrier. But the Emperor laughed and easily destroyed it. So the battle between the Goblin Emperor and Alice began. Alice uses another ice chain to trap the Goblin Emperor, and while he is trapped, she throws Tron's adventurer's badge to Cecil, and tells her that he is still alive and is waiting for her. Seeing that Alice is willing to risk her life to save the village ladies, the Goblin Emperor tells her he will be merciful and give her two choices. He tells her she should drop her sword and becomes his consort, or she should fight with him to the end. However, Alice says she would rather die, and the Goblin Emperor tells her he will discipline her after he catches her. Suddenly, Alice starts to gather her ice energy to unleash an attack. At the same time, Henry, who had entered the cave, encountered a large goblin. The goblin was about to kill Henry, but Merlin arrived on time and killed the goblin easily. This shocked Henry, as Merlin killed the goblin with just one move. Henry then realized that Merlin was too powerful and he was wrong about Merlin not being strong. Henry quickly grabbed Merlin's leg and begged him to teach him the quick draw he mentioned before. But Merlin declined, and as the two argued, they heard Martha's voice. Henry tells Martha that Merlin is too strong, as he killed this goblin with a single strike. Martha then asks Merlin to go and help Alice, as she is fighting the Goblin Emperor alone. But she is afraid as Alice isn't the Goblin Emperor's opponent. Merlin tried to refuse it initially, but when Martha promised to pay 3 times the salary, he quickly agreed. Merlin then told them to go outside and leave to save Alice. Meanwhile, Alice was caught by the Emperor and was crying in pain. She smiled as she trapped the Emperor in her trap using a divine ice punishment technique. Then, the icicle blade started falling from the sky, and while the Emperor was trying to protect himself, she pierced his heart. But to her surprise, the Goblin Emperor healed himself and revealed that a goblin's heart was on the right side, not the left. He then tells her he won't show mercy anymore. The Goblin Emperor then attacks Alice, but she tries to block it with an ice wall. However, it crumbles, and she smashes into the wall. She starts to bleed, and the Goblin Emperor picks her up and says she will be his captive forever. Suddenly he senses something, and the next second, his hand is cut off by Merlin, who is now carrying Alice. Seeing her almost blacked out, he is surprised that she staked everything for people she had nothing to do with. Merlin puts her down in a corner, and Alice looks at Merlin with blurry eyes and thinks Elgin's master swordsman has come to save her again. As Merlin approaches the Goblin Emperor, Alice, in her almost blacked out state, tells him she likes him, which makes him surprised. Merlin asks what she is saying, but he is interrupted by the Goblin Emperor, who asks him if he is ready. The emperor laughed as he withdrew his hand. He continuously attacked Merlin, but Merlin easily dodged the attacks. The emperor then offered Merlin the position of prime minister and asked him to join him. Merlin laughed at him and insulted the emperor. This angered the emperor, and he dashed toward Merlin, attacking him with full power, but Merlin easily dodged the attack. Merlin then attacked the emperor and cut him with a single slash. Merlin was happy because his curse would be alleviated for a while. He then noticed the goblin's treasure but also noticed that the dungeon was falling. With no other choice left, he left the treasure behind and saved Alice. The people outside noticed a part of the dungeon collapsing, but Merlin appeared with Alice in his hands from the middle of the dust. The next day, Alice woke up and found herself in bed. Martha entered the room and told Alice Merlin had saved her life last night. After a while, Merlin came to meet Alice. Alice then thanked Merlin for saving her life. Merlin replied that he would not accept a simple thank you. He wanted her to make a referral for him as payment. However, Alice refused and said she would not do anything for him. Merlin threatened her, saying that if she did not help him, he would tell the people that the 233rd hero was an ungrateful bastard. Not wanting to hear bad rumors about herself, Alice agreed to help him. Meanwhile, a black-haired woman searched for something near the fallen goblin dungeon. After looking for a while, she picked up the goblin emperor's weapon. She used magic on the weapon and found a key hidden inside it. She says she has had a lot of trouble finding the key, yet it was easy to get hold of it. The woman laughed as she acquired the third key of the Hell's Core. Suddenly, a dark portal opens, and a voice calls her name, Kaltsona. The voice asks her if she has obtained the key, and she replies yes. Then the voice says that it seems like the rumor about the key being in the Saugus branch was true, and it is no wonder they didn't migrate to the south and join the kingdom as they were protecting the key. The voice tells her that their plan to revive the previous realm has been on the agenda, and as long as they obtain the power of the Hell's Core, overturning Great Britain will be easy. Kaltsona later replies that she would offer her soul to revive the realm. In the next scene, Merlin and Allison say goodbye to the villagers and leave in a cart. Some of the ladies in the village are sad to see Merlin leave. And as Merlin leaves, he tells Henry to take care of his mother. Henry says he will do that, and when he has an aura, he will travel to Wrexham to find him. Later, Merlin and Alice argue or roast each other during the never-boring trip to Wrexham. Finally, after a week, they reach their destination, Wrexham. After reaching Wrexham, Merlin and Alice quickly went to the Adventurers Guild to complete their business. As they entered, they noticed an armored man taking the adventurer test, and he was ranked at the Saint rank, which surprised everyone in the building. When Merlin sees this, he asks Alice if the Saint's rank is on the same level as the Goblin Emperor's. She replies that there are differences within the Saint rank, and only 3 Saint ranks were in the guild, including the old guild master. However, she says she is surprised that she will meet one again. But Merlin replies that the number of Saint rank they had was so little as he had a lot of Saint rank subordinates when he was the Demon King, and her guild was wretched. The guild's receptionist, Luja, then welcomes Alice. Luja is surprised that Alice brought a man to the guild and thinks he is her boyfriend. Still, Alice explains to her that they were not in that kind of relationship, and she tells her that he needed her referral due to some special circumstances. Alice explained Merlin's situation to Luja that he is a fugitive, so he wants to become an adventurer. Luja understood and told Merlin that if he became an adventurer, his bounty would be revoked, and he could repay his debt by completing missions. She then asked him to take a test to verify his strength and told him the higher the rank, the more benefits there would be. But Merlin says there is no meaning in being an adventurer if he cannot take the highest ranked mission. However, she tells him that even though his initial rank may be low, and he is not strong enough, he can still make up for it with experience and advance in rank. After she explains the importance of strength to him, she tells him that to take the test, he should put his hands on a crystal ball, which will glow different colors based on his strength. Merlin put his hand on the crystal ball with full confidence. Even the other adventurers got nervous, but everyone was shocked as Merlin had no strength. According to the crystal, everyone starts to make fun of Merlin because of his results, and Alice tells him to stop fooling around. But Merlin explains that he doesn't have mana. He just uses his quick draw technique to defeat enemies. Alice is surprised that Merlin has no mana, as she has seen him defeat strong opponents with his sword technique. Seeing that Merlin cannot prove his strength, Alice asks Luja if she can vouch for him since he is very qualified to be an adventurer. But Luja tells her that the rules won't allow him, since he cannot prove his strength. Merlin then asks Luja to arrange a fight for him with their strongest adventurer. If he wins, then he can become an adventurer. Luja tells him not to make a joke like that, and Merlin tells her seriously that he wasn't joking and he will take all of them on if they want to come together at once. Suddenly, an old man comes behind and says he will test Merlin's strength. The elderly man is Taylor, the guild master of Wrexham. He then instructs the others not to follow them inside the training hall and instructs Merlin to go with him. Taylor instructs Merlin to use all of his strength to assault him in the training room and warns that if he even moves 1 inch, it will be his loss. As he sprints toward Guild Master Taylor, Merlin chuckles. Taylor is unable even to avoid Merlin's overpowering speed and strength. But before Merlin's sword can hit the old man, he stops. The force of the slash nevertheless destroys half of the city, and the power shocks Taylor. Merlin reassures Guildmaster Taylor that he has just used the back of his blade as the Guildmaster falls to the ground, and he explains that Taylor would be dead if he used the other side. This makes Taylor wonder who Merlin is. After a while, Alice and Merlin leave the Adventurers Guild. Luja asks the old man why he used his full strength on a normal person because now they need to pay for the damages. Seeing that, just a slash from the back of Merlin's sword cuts the road in half without hurting anyone outside. However, Taylor tells them not to say anything about the matter again. Merlin is happy that he finally becomes an iron-plate adventurer. Alice and Merlin still roast each other and leave, but Merlin has always spent all his savings on the racecourse. At night, Merlin tries to sell Matchbox to earn money to live and eat. After thinking for a while, Merlin stands up and decides to freeload a meal from Alice. Meanwhile, Alice is enjoying a bath and praying for that bastard Merlin to sleep on the street like a beggar. She adds that no one heeds the matches he's selling, so he's beset by hunger and cold. Suddenly, Alice hears her doorbell ringing. She opens the door, thinking that it is her landlady, but it is Merlin who offers to spend a night with her. However, as Alice is hostile towards Merlin, his honey trap doesn't work on her, and she throws him with a kick. She then hears the doorbell again. This time, her landlady tells her not to use weapons in the house. She notices Alice and Merlin fighting with each other, so she tells Alice to treat her husband well. Merlin quickly gets into the role of Alice's husband and looks at her with teary eyes. Alice angrily tries to attack Merlin, but she is stopped by the landlady, who tells her that if she doesn't stop, she will have to leave her house. With no other choice left, Alice goes inside the landlady's place and tells Merlin to take care of her as she had suffered a lot to find this place. She gives Merlin an extra key to enter again if Alice throws him out. After a while, Alice shouts at Merlin, who is trying to enter her house forcefully, but Merlin tells her to calm down as he has a great offer for her. He suggests renting the house together, and by doing that, they both could save a lot of money. After thinking for a while, Alice agrees to his offer and asks for the rent. However, the only thing Merlin has is the racecourse tickets. The next day, Merlin is angry at the horse, as he has lost all his money in the race. At the same time, a man named Arnold tries to impress Alice, but she is not interested in him. However, an adventurer tells Arnold that Alice has already found someone and points toward Merlin. This shocks Arnold, and he angrily challenges Merlin to a duel. He shows an AE-ranked mission to Merlin and says that whoever completes this mission first will be the right partner for Alice. Luja explains to Alice that some robbers have snuck into an underground palace and activated a trap. Now that the undead is appearing and attacking villages, they have started to recruit. Arnold then tells Alice that a Saint-rank adventurer named Claude is also joining him, so he asks Alice to team up with them. Alice agrees, and they quickly stamp the contract. Merlin also wants to go, but Luja tells him he must get 2 more teammates first. Merlin quickly selects the drunk adventurer from the 4, and the guild master Taylor allows them to go with just 2 members. Merlin is thinking about how to get a carriage when the drunk man arranges it for him. But the next morning, when the man comes to his senses, he asks Merlin to return, as the mission is too dangerous. Merlin tries to comfort him, but the man thinks Merlin is stupid because he is an iron-plate adventurer. Suddenly they hear someone approaching them, and a knight comes close and asks if they know the fastest way to Denbighshire. The adventurer tells the knight there is a way, but the path is a bit narrow, so they need to walk for a while, as their carriage is too big for the path. This angers the knight, so he tries to hit him with a whip, but Merlin stops the whip and throws him down. He tells the knight to mind his manners, as not only is he not grateful, but he is also showing them his attitude. The adventurer tries to stop Merlin as the knights are from Duke Rose, the most powerful person in Wales. The knight gets up and challenges Merlin to a duel, but a voice stops him. A beautiful woman named Cecilia comes out of the carriage and scolds the knight, Kyle, for challenging a weakling. She says they should not stop when just two ants are blocking their way. Cecilia apologizes for her knight's behavior, but Merlin disrespects her and tells her to show her chest while apologizing. This angers the knight, but he is again stopped by Cecilia, who says that they should not waste time on a weakling. With no other choice left, the knight and Cecilia leave. Meanwhile, Arnold tries to impress Alice and remembers when he first met her. One day, he is visiting Elgin City to meet his uncle when he notices a silver-haired girl defeating a giant boar. When he sees her heroic moves, he falls in love with her. To win Alice's heart, he quits his life as a noble and becomes an adventurer. He then talks about Elgin's master swordsman. Claude interrupts Arnold and asks him about this swordsman. Arnold explains that Elgin's master swordsman defeated two Saint-rank pirates with a single move, but Claude replies that defeating two Saint-rank pirates is not a big deal, and that even in the Saint rank, there are strong and weak ones. Claude then angrily says that this era is not good as there are fewer real experts, and the royals are incompetent. Arnold asks, if Elgin's master swordsman can't be called a hero, then who in Great Britain can be called a hero? Claude then asks him if he has heard about the four heroes from the previous realm. The dragon-taming robber Kalsona, the twin sword masters Zoe and Joey, and the last one, the Tempest warrior Bernard, who's the war machine on the battlefield, who even fought with the dragon in a one-on-one fight, and who is also the leader of the four heroes. The butler then tells them to rest, as they have traveled for a long time. While going out, Alice says to Claude that the four heroes have died, so they should not compare the deceased with the people now. Alice is sitting alone and thinking about Merlin and whether the guild allows him to participate or not. Suddenly, Arnold appears behind Alice and tries to impress her again. Frustrated, Alice gets up and says she will look for Claude. She enters the forest and hears a voice saying, "I am offering my soul to revive the previous realm." Suddenly, Claude appears and is about to kill Alice but stops at the last second. He apologizes and says that he thought she was a robber or something. Alice then says she came to inform him that they are setting out. Before leaving, Claude asks if she has heard something, but she quickly denies it. She thinks that Claude is suspicious, and what does he mean by reviving the previous realm? Meanwhile, Cecilia meets Arnold and asks what he is doing here. Arnold explains that he is also here to deal with the undead like her and has a saint-rank adventurer with him. Suddenly, the butler shouts and asks Arnold to look ahead. A herd of flaming rhinos is running toward them at full speed. Kyle quickly orders the other knights to take positions and protect Lady Cecilia at all costs. Cecilia then casts the Holy Light Arbitration on the knights. The knights are positioned to attack the rhinos, but Claude jumps in front of them. Kyle tells Claude not to stand in front as they should gather together to withstand the attack, but Claude replies that he will not do something like that, and he kills the herd with a single strike. Arnold then introduces Claude to everyone, but Cecilia tries to buy Claude. She promises to double his payment if he joins her, but Claude refuses her request and leaves. Cecilia thinks that Claude is strange, and she also senses faint dark magic from him. She orders Kyle to speed up and says they will try to reach Derbyshire before midnight. She says that the matter of the undead is her trial, and she must solve it herself, so her father will see her in a new light. Later at night, in the Denbighshire Standing Army camp, the soldiers are having a feast and say they will kill all the skeletons tomorrow. Claude tells Alice to go and enjoy herself, as he is going to have some rest. Alice thinks that if Claude is a major criminal, it is dangerous to team up with him. As Alice goes ahead, she gets shocked and falls. She thinks Merlin is already here when he sets out later than her. Merlin is enjoying a sweet time with some beautiful ladies and is bragging about his quick draw technique. But Alice goes close to them and sends the girls away as she wants to talk to Merlin. She asks Merlin how he managed to arrive here faster than her. Merlin replies that it's all thanks to Hobbs, who took a shortcut with her donkey. Alice angrily shouts at Merlin for using her cute donkey without her permission. Merlin also tells her that when he whipped its butt, the donkey ran faster than the horse. Hobbs then makes fun of Alice's flat chest and gets punched by her. She then asks him if he knows anything about the Dendishers matter, and Hobbs gives her the information in exchange for some coins. He says there is a tomb of the Prime Minister from the previous realm, and this Prime Minister was a necromancer, so he probably summoned those skeletons and undead. Meanwhile, inside one of the tents, Claude thinks that everything he is about to do is for the sake of the previous realm. The story continues as Alice notices Claude heading somewhere later at night and decides to follow him. Hobbs, while drunk, also sees Alice following Claude but thinks it's his imagination. She then notices Claude entering the underground maze all alone. In the morning, Arnold sees Merlin sleeping with someone and pulls the blanket, thinking it's Alice. Merlin wakes up with a body pillow and tells Arnold that the blanket is a part of him, so there won't be a next time for Arnold if he does it again because he will send him to hell. But Arnold tells Merlin that Alice and Claude are missing from the tent, and he can't find them anywhere. Hobbs says he noticed Alice going to the tomb at night. Merlin thinks Alice is after the high reward, so he quickly changes his mind and decides to go to the tomb. Hobbs tries to stop Merlin, but he doesn't listen and says that the enemy this time is undead, so he can't use them to extend his life, so he must get the high rewards. After saying that, Merlin leaves. Meanwhile, Alice secretly follows Claude inside the underground maze and is confused because although it's his first time, Claude isn't getting lost. As Alice walks, she notices some battle scars, and she observes that someone has already gone through there. Later, Claude arrives at a gate guarded by some skeletons. The skeletons attack Claude, but he quickly defeats them and goes inside. Inside the room, a high-level skeleton sits on a throne and asks Claude who he is. Claude greets the skeleton by saying, "It's been 400 years, Sir Ian," but Ian doesn't know him. Claude then puts his sword down and asks if he doesn't remember the Empire's Tempest Warrior. Ian quickly stands up and says that Bernal died a long time ago. Claude then explains that the prince revived the 4 heroes with dark magic and is functioning as the undead. Ian asks if the prince is still alive and, if so, what he is planning this time. Claude says they need stronger power to revive the previous realm and asks Ian to hand over the key he's protecting. Ian angrily says that if the previous king hadn't made a contract with Satan, none of this would have happened. But Claude replies that to acquire power, there's a need to make sacrifices and asks for the key again. However, Ian refuses to give him the key, and they prepare to attack each other. Unknown to them, Alice is still hiding and watching their intense battle. Meanwhile, Merlin is lost inside the maze and is worried that someone else might take the high reward if he wastes time. He then remembers Hobbs' words that the maze has several layers. So, to save time, he destroys the floors to go down fast. At the same time, on the second layer of the maze, Cecilia and her knights are fighting with the skeletons. Kyle says they could die, but Cecilia stops him and says they'll escape the maze. Suddenly, a skeleton scares Cecilia, and she falls to the ground and loses her staff. As soon as the holy light disappears, the skeleton starts approaching the knights. Kyle kills the skeleton attacking Cecilia, and she runs to pick up her staff. But a high-level skeleton appears and attacks Cecilia, but Kyle saves her. The skeleton kills all the other knights, and now only Kyle and Cecilia remain. Kyle asks her to run away, but Cecilia refuses to leave him behind. Kyle then attacks with full force and manages to injure the skeleton, but the skeleton pierces him with the spear. The skeleton then throws Kyle on the ground and goes close to kill Cecilia, and as it is about to kill her, the roof is destroyed, and Merlin comes down from the hole. Merlin looks at Cecilia and asks what the daughter of Rose's family is doing down there. Cecilia explains that she wants to prove her powers to her father, so she comes down with her knights but gets assaulted by the strong undead. Merlin laughs and says that her powers are hers, so she doesn't need to prove them to others, and now, because of her foolishness, her knights have died. As Merlin is not interested in helping her, he says goodbye to her, but the high-level skeleton attacks him before he can leave. With no other choice left, he has to kill the skeleton as it dares to charge at him. Cecilia notices Merlin's overwhelming power and asks him to rescue them, but Merlin refuses and asks why he should help her. Cecilia promises to give him a reward. Merlin thinks she insulted him before, so he should scam her and ask for 5,000 gold coins. He agrees and says he will help her, but the reward should be before he finishes. Cecilia thinks a strong person like him would not be interested in money or fame, so she removes her clothes and promises to please him. But Merlin angrily tells her to stop, as he only wants the 5,000 gold coins. Merlin then takes out the sword and creates a platform for them to stay. He says the undead can't climb that high, and as he is busy, he will come back to save them, and he leaves. Meanwhile, Alice watches the fight and understands why Claude always talks about the previous realm. She thinks this is bigger than she can handle, so she should inform the guild master first. Ian insults Claude and says that his movement has gotten slower. This makes Claude angry as he attacks Ian with his skill, but Ian laughs and uses his secret art, the King of Skeletons, so a giant magical skeleton appears in front of the giant skeleton. Claude uses his secret art Tempest mode, but before the two can attack each other, the roof collapses, and Merlin comes down and says he is on time. He asks Claude about Alice, while Claude is confused about how Merlin crossed the first and second levels filled with undead. Alice is still hiding and realizes that he broke the layers to reach the boss. Ian angrily asks Merlin who he is and how he dares barge into his eternal resting place. Ian attacks Merlin with magic, but to his surprise, Merlin is unharmed by it. Alice knows that magic doesn't work on Merlin because, in the past, the church suffered a great loss due to his anti-magic. Merlin tells Ian that he is a skeleton worth 5,000 gold coins, so he should be patient. But Ian uses the giant skeleton to attack Merlin. Claude thinks that even he cannot take a direct hit from the king's skeleton, so Merlin must be finished. But to his surprise, Merlin stops the punch and is unharmed by it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on another video.